You really think there's a seat for you? You're not blood related, just a daughter-in-law. In front of the lavish meal at the restaurant, my mother-in-law smirked at me, waving her hand as if to tell me to leave. I was trembling with anger, and as I turned to leave the room, mother-in-law stopped me. Wait, what about the bill? If you're leaving early, leave the money. With a smug expression, mother-in-law demanded money from me, and I smiled back at her. Why would I pay for a stranger's bill? My name is Maya, 29-year-old office worker. My husband Terrell is the same age as me, and we were living fairly happy days together. Except for one thing. That was the presence of my overbearing mother-in-law. Not only was she overbearing, but she also tried to impose her ways on me. Our house is very close to mother-in-law's, so she often comes over uninvited, nagging me every time. You can't satisfy my son with that kind of cooking. Add more side dishes. In this room, what a mess. What are you doing all day at home? You're such a failure. Mother-in-law, knowing that I work during the day, would come in the evening and mock me for being at home all day. Also, since she adores her son, my husband, she doesn't act like this in front of him. So even when I talk to my husband about mother-in-law, he doesn't believe me. If he hasn't seen mother-in-law's harassment, it's not unreasonable for him not to believe it. At first glance, she seems normal. So no matter what I say to my husband, he doesn't believe me. Perhaps thinking it's okay as long as my husband doesn't find out, mother-in-law's nagging escalated. Now she comes in with a key my husband gave her, complaining about cleaning and cooking. She also badmouths me to the neighbors, and the list goes on. I told my husband many times that I want to move far away from my in-laws, but he's been busy with a big project at work and hasn't taken me seriously. Then my husband got promoted at work. The project was a big success, so he got promoted and his salary increased.
How about thinking about having children now that our salary has increased?
I think it's a good idea, but if we're thinking about children, I like a more child-friendly town. There are few childcare centers here and no parks to play in. Isn't it time to move? Finally, my husband gave me a positive response about moving. I was happier about this than the news of his promotion. However, that feeling didn't last long. The next day, mother-in-law came over as usual without any notice. I was fed up, thinking she had come to nag again, but it seemed different this time. I've decided to celebrate my son's promotion, so I've reserved a restaurant. It's a very expensive place, but it's elegant, and the food is top-notch. Plus, the staff's attitude is wonderful, and it's a word-of-mouth reputation. That's nice. Good for you. You're as unfriendly as ever. Well, never mind. I want you to come to this restaurant too. Please come. I'll check my schedule, but it's probably impossible. Don't say that. We'll be waiting for you. Even though I answered that way, mother-in-law just smirked and left. Until now, she had been enjoying excluding me, but now she's inviting me and saying she'll wait. There must be something going on. When I asked my husband when he got home, he said he had already told mother-in-law that we would go together.
She reserved that restaurant for us, and I'm looking forward to it. You feel the same way, don't you, Maya?
Sorry, but I'm not looking forward to it. I don't know how much money it will cost at such an expensive place. I don't want to go. Just say I have urgent business and enjoy yourself.
Why are you thinking so negatively? Besides, it's not just us going to the restaurant. My brothers are bringing their wives too. It would be bad if you didn't come with the whole family celebrating me.
My husband, excited about going to a fancy restaurant for the first time, insisted that I should go even though I didn't want to. My words no longer reached my husband. If he believes mother-in-law more than me, I'll record mother-in-law's harassment with a voice recorder I bought online. She's probably planning to harass me at the celebration too. I'll record her voice and play it for my husband. If he still defends mother-in-law, I'll divorce him. With that decision, I felt a bit better. Still, the day to meet mother-in-law at the restaurant was depressing, and I kept sighing. I hardly knew my husband's brothers, having only met them at the wedding. And I had no memory of talking to their wives beyond greetings. When we arrived at the restaurant, the waiter led us to a large room. Mother-in-law, the eldest son and his wife, and the third son and his wife were already seated. The lavish food was already on the table, and there was only one empty seat. My husband then tilted his head in wonder.
There aren't enough seats. Did the waiter make a mistake? I'll go ask. Everyone start eating.
The moment my husband left the room, mother-in-law stood up and sneered at me. There's no seat for you. Why should I invite a stranger who just married my son to a family celebration? So I'll give you a choice. Show your sincerity and be accepted as family, or leave and never show your face to me again. Choose now.
I'm leaving,
I answered without hesitation, and mother-in-law was momentarily flustered. Did she think I would beg her to recognize me as family in this situation? No way. Listen to the end. If you pay the entire bill here, I'll recognize you as Terrell's wife. You must be frustrated being treated as a stranger, so pay up and become family. I told you I'm leaving. Why should I pay for someone else's family's bill? As I turned my back, mother-in-law slammed the table and shouted, Don't you get it? I'm offering to make you family. Are you okay with being a stranger? Pay up now. I'm fine being a stranger. Since I'm a stranger, I won't pay for your meal. Goodbye. Mother-in-law chased after me, but by the time she reached the entrance of the room from the farthest seat, I was already at the entrance of the restaurant. When I got home, thinking I'd email my husband, he came back within 10 minutes.
The waiter said the reservation number wasn't wrong, and my mom was causing a scene. I heard the situation from my brother. I'm sorry for making you feel bad.
You managed to come back quickly. She seems like she would make a fuss if you left.
How could I eat with them after they made fun of my Maya?
My husband quickly learned what had happened after I left and hurriedly followed me home. Furthermore, my declaration that I was fine being a stranger seemed to have awakened the eldest son's wife and third son's wife. They had thought that enduring harassment was something to be endured in silence, but seeing me talk back made them realize I can do it too. In their momentum, both left and their husbands, the eldest and third sons, hurriedly followed. I was expecting complaints from mother-in-law, and within 3 hours, the phone started ringing repeatedly. I ignored it, but it was so noisy that I blocked it, and then a call came from an unknown number. Hello?
Sorry for calling so late. Is this Maya's mobile phone?
The man on the phone identified himself as a police officer from the nearby police box. According to the police, after being left alone, mother-in-law ate what she could and apparently tried to have me pay the bill later. However, the restaurant already had a negative impression of mother-in-law after the commotion. They refused mother-in-law's request, thinking there was no chance I would come back to pay after leaving angrily. Mother-in-law then called me to come back and pay, but I ignored all her calls. The restaurant suggested she pay by card, but mother-in-law didn't have a credit card and hadn't prepared enough cash for everyone's meals. She tried to call other family members to cover the cost, but no one answered. Finally cornered, mother-in-law started yelling that it was all my fault, and she became furious and caused a scene, breaking expensive vases and flower pots at the front, leading to the police being called. The called police calmed the raging mother-in-law, but she kept insisting she was not in the wrong. The restaurant not only unpaid, but also stuck with a troublesome customer, asked someone to take her home. Feeling guilty about ignoring a call from the police, we reluctantly returned to the restaurant. When we arrived, mother-in-law was being calmed down by the police. Mother-in-law, who had been crossing her arms, raised her eyes and screamed as soon as she saw me. "You good for nothing! This situation happened because you didn't pay the bill. It's natural to help your mother, isn't it? Pay up now!" I was utterly astonished that mother-in-law would say something almost threatening, even with the police right there. The police said that if no one took her home, they would either take her to her in-laws' house in a patrol car or arrest her for dining and dashing. Please take her away. Arrest her or whatever, just make her take responsibility. When I said this with a cold voice, mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock. "How can you say something so cold? I can't believe it. Just pay up. It's bad luck to have a family member arrested." I don't care. I'm not family, and I don't want to get close to someone who's talking crazy and causing a scene. As I tried to leave the restaurant and leave the rest of the police, my husband, who had been silent all along, glared at me.
I understand that what was said and done to Maya was terrible, but is it something bad enough to be arrested for?
You're missing the point. She's in trouble with the police because she dined and dashed and caused a scene at the restaurant. I have nothing to do with it. Or are you saying that I'm the one at fault for not paying for 6 people's meals even though I didn't eat? My husband fell silent, but he walked past me and headed toward the police and the restaurant staff. I knew what my husband was going to do just by that, so I called out to his back. "If you're going to pay for her meal and compensate her, we're getting divorced. Think about that." My husband didn't respond to my words and silently took out his wallet. I sighed and left the restaurant. I walked the familiar road back home and began packing my essential belongings, preparing to leave. Just before the date changed, my husband finally returned.
Mom's not getting arrested. It seems she was really in the wrong, but the restaurant said they'd forgive her if I compensated them and promised never to come back. I didn't have nearly enough money, so I had my brothers come and help. Ugh, I'm so tired.
My husband rambled on about what happened after I left, looking exhausted. Perhaps annoyed by my lack of reaction, he came over to me with a sullen look.
"Hey, what's with these bags?"
"I'm preparing to leave the house because we're getting divorced. I told you that if you defended her, we'd get divorced. You're not going to say you didn't hear me, are you?" My husband looked down at me, packing in astonishment, but then he raised his eyes and began to yell.
"What's going on today? You've been acting strange all day. I get that Mom did something terrible, but why do we have to get divorced?"
"I've told you I'm being harassed, and even when you see evidence and hear other people's testimony, you still choose your mother, who was almost arrested, over me. Is it strange that I want to divorce someone like that? I've had enough." My husband continued to say various things, but it all went in one ear and out the other. I prepared to leave the house and also made preparations for divorce. The next morning, I immediately went to get the divorce papers. When I signed and handed them to my husband, he made a big fuss about not wanting to divorce. But when I said I would involve a lawyer, he reluctantly signed and I submitted the papers right away. I was finally able to return to being a stranger. Afterward, my husband moved out of the house and went to live with his parents. Apparently, he had relied on me for most of the housework, so he couldn't do it himself. As a result, the house became a mess. He disliked the dirty house and canceled the apartment lease, deciding to return to his parents' home. Also, the eldest and third sons ended up with similar outcomes. On that day, when my husband called his brothers to help with the compensation, they each had a big fight with their wives. The wives said they didn't want to pay for something that was their own fault, but the brothers used their savings to help their mother without consulting them. Moreover, the brothers believed mother-in-law's words that they would be arrested because of their unreasonable wives. Their love cooled at the sight of them belittling me, and they were confronted with divorce on the spot. Both of them also returned to their parents' home, saying they didn't want to do housework. In the end, mother-in-law and the 3 childlike brothers returned to the in-laws' house. Thanks to that, they are being laughed at by the neighbors, saying, "All the brothers were abandoned by their wives." Mother-in-law calls such talk nonsense and passionately explains how useful and ungrateful we wives were. The husbands heard the story and smugly nodded, saying,
I knew it was the wives' fault. Divorcing them was the right decision.
However, I had a decent relationship with the neighbors, and no one believed such talk. The neighbors knew about mother-in-law's nasty personality, so they quietly kept their distance and laughed at her. Mother-in-law became known as a mother who failed in educating her sons, and the husbands became famous in the neighborhood as mother-loving sons who defended their mother instead of protecting their wives. Even though the furious mother-in-law and husbands tried to contact me, I had changed all my contact information and moved to a new house. In the end, the husbands couldn't find us and are living their lives, constantly complaining. Since then, thanks to no longer being involved with mother-in-law and the others, my days have become enjoyable. Of course, being free from mother-in-law stress is a big part of it, but making new friends has also been significant. Actually, I hit it off with the ex-wives of the eldest and third sons while going through the divorce process, bonding over our complaints about mother-in-law. Now we often go out for meals and enjoy shopping on weekends. In terms of giving me such wonderful friends, I might even have to thank my ex-husband. The day after tomorrow, we're all planning to go to a new cafe. From now on, we can do what we want. It should be obvious, but it feels more liberating than before. From now on, I want to walk our own lives without getting involved with such people. I'm also grateful to them. I think I would still be living alone if it weren't for them. The reason I'm not lonely now, and the reason I can live happily, is all thanks to them. I'm truly thankful. I hope this relationship continues forever.